how one man built a $2 trillion empire, literally starting from the passenger seat of a beat-up Chevy Blazer. We're not just looking at Jeff Bezos the person here, we're popping the hood on the highly optimized machine he built. We're going to break down the architecture of Amazon and see exactly how Bezos systematically scaled a simple vision into an inescapable global infrastructure.
Take a look at this number, $1.2 million. That is what Amazon makes every single minute today. Just let that sink in for a second, right? $1 million a minute. It perfectly sets the stage for our journey because, honestly, you don't reach this level of scale with a viral product or a catchy ad campaign. No, this is the result of a ruthless, methodical strategy that basically rewired how we buy things, how we store data, and how physical goods move across the entire planet.
So it begs the question, doesn't it? How did a guy selling books out of a garage end up building the literal infrastructure of modern capitalism? What we're really exploring today is essentially a 30-year siege on the global economy. It started with a simple, bullet-pointed plan and ended with this sprawling, heavily optimized machine that just quietly runs in the background of our everyday lives.
So let's kick things off with our first phase, discovering escape velocity and the D.E. Shaw years.
Long before the billions, young Jeff was this brilliant, highly logical guy who literally gave high school graduation speeches about building space hotels and colonizing the moon. He was incredibly ambitious. Eventually, he finds himself working as a senior VP at this mysterious Wall Street hedge fund called D.E. Shaw. And while he's crunching data there in 1994, he stumbles across a truly staggering number, 2,300%. That was the annual growth rate of the early internet. Bezos realized in an instant, this wasn't just some tech bubble. This was a gravitational force. It was a mathematical anomaly he absolutely couldn't ignore. And it represented the exact escape velocity he needed for those huge ambitions.
Now, being the incredibly methodical analyst that he is, he didn't just guess what to sell online. He systematically brainstormed this giant spreadsheet of 20 different internet business ideas. We're talking everything from online CDs to clothing to dog food. But he concluded that books were the absolute perfect gateway drug to e-commerce. Think about it. They're compact, they're super easy to store, and they are universally standardized.
So he actually walks away from his very lucrative Wall Street gig, packs his entire life into a Chevy Blazer, and get this, while his wife is driving them to Seattle, he's sitting in the passenger seat typing up the business plan at 65 miles per hour. Even the naming process was an evolution. At first, he wanted Cadabra, like abracadabra, but his lawyer misheard it as cadaver. Yeah, definitely not great for sales. Then he was obsessed with the name Relentless. He even bought the domain, but he finally landed on Amazon. Why? Well, it started with an A, so it would sit right at the top of alphabetical directory lists, and it represented the world's biggest river. You see, he didn't want to build a bookstore. He was aiming for the everything store right from day one. Which brings us to phase 2, the get big fast strategy. This was an era of pure, unadulterated urgency. Those early garage days were famously almost comically frugal. I mean, we're talking about desks made out of literal doors bolted to 2x4s. Every single dollar they saved was pumped directly back into growth. They really didn't care about perfection. They cared about speed. Code was being written by totally exhausted developers. Mistakes were absolutely happening, but speed was literally the only metric that mattered. In the very beginning, Bezos would actually ring a bell in the office every time they made a sale. They kept doing this right up until the sheer volume of incoming orders forced them to stop simply because the bell was ringing nonstop.
During all this rapid expansion, Bezos made what was, at the time, a highly counterintuitive move. He introduced customer reviews. Now, letting customers publicly trash-talk products directly on your own retail site, that seemed like absolute insanity to traditional retailers. But Bezos saw a brutally simple formula. Transparency builds trust, and trust engineers incredibly deep customer loyalty. Wall Street didn't get it at first, but this one move turned Amazon from a basic digital storefront into this massive community research hub.
But then, things got rocky. Let's move into surviving the crucible and the infamous dot-com crash.
So March 2000 hits, and the dot-com bubble spectacularly bursts. The wild, endless optimism of the 90s just vanishes overnight. Amazon was burning through cash, showing zero profit, and their stock plummeted from over $100 down to just $6 a share. Financial analysts were screaming bankruptcy, thinking the company was about to be wiped off the map. But instead of panicking or begging for bailouts, Bezos goes entirely surgical. That chaotic, bell-ringing energy from the early days, gone. Replaced by cold, hard precision. He slashed burn rates, streamlined absolutely every operation, and essentially forged the company into this unbreakable, robotic, logistical machine. Amazon didn't just survive the crash, it mutated into something far more dangerous.
Coming out of that crash, the entire strategy shifted.
Welcome to Phase 4, building the invisible infrastructure, the true backbone of the web.
This is where Amazon stopped just selling things and started firing off what you can really only describe as kill shots. In an unbelievably tight 3-year window, they fundamentally reshaped 3 different industries. Look at this. In 2005, they launched Prime, completely altering the expectations of shipping. In 2006, AWS launches to the public, fundamentally changing cloud computing forever. And then in 2007, they dropped the Kindle, which basically collapses and reshapes the entire publishing industry.
Let's break down that first shot. When Prime launched, analysts actually criticized it as financial suicide. I mean, free 2-day shipping on everything? Everyone thought Amazon would just bleed to death. But Prime wasn't a perk. It was a brilliantly engineered psychological trap to condition us. Think about it. You join for the convenience, then you buy more stuff just to justify the yearly cost, and eventually, you entirely stop checking prices on other websites. Boom! Amazon achieves complete locked-in loyalty.
Now that second shot was arguably even more consequential. To handle their own chaotic internal growth, Amazon's engineers had to build this flexible, modular computing power. They soon realized this internal fix was incredibly valuable, so they packaged it and launched it as Amazon Web Services, or AWS. And today, AWS silently powers Netflix, NASA, the CIA, and ironically enough, even parts of Walmart's operations. What this literally means is that competitors fighting Amazon's retail dominance are out there unknowingly paying rent to use Amazon's own servers. It's wild.
This unparalleled infrastructure naturally brings us to our next phase, the ultimate retail predator, where Amazon starts devouring the ecosystem. As their marketplace grew, third-party sellers started noticing a really disturbing trend. Reports were coming out that Amazon was allegedly using its own internal platform data to spot highly successful third-party products, cloning them into Amazon-branded versions, and then essentially crushing the very sellers who created the market in the first place. This whole dynamic is perfectly summed up in a legendary quote from Bezos: "Your margin is my opportunity." Let me tell you, that wasn't just a clever corporate slogan. It was a ruthless mathematical threat that forced entire global industries to restructure themselves just out of pure fear of becoming the optimization engine's next target. The real-world consequences of this were absolutely devastating. Just take a look at the staggering body count of legendary retail giants here. Borders, Circuit City, Toys R Us, Radio Shack. One by one, these supposedly untouchable titans just collapsed under the relentless pressure of Amazon's highly optimized, data-driven machine. Even Walmart, the biggest of them all, was forced into a massive ground-up rebuild just to stay relevant in the game.
Then, jump to 2017. Amazon drops $13.7 billion to acquire Whole Foods. But, this wasn't about selling more organic kale. Not at all. It was a massive logistics and efficiency experiment. Overnight, physical grocery stores were turned into local distribution nodes for the Amazon network. Traditional checkout lines started evolving into app-based scanning. It was really about conditioning humanity for invisible efficiency in the physical world, exactly the same way they'd already done it in the digital world.
And that brings us to our final act, leaving Earth behind.
So by the late 2010s, Amazon has its tentacles in everything: healthcare, news, entertainment, smart homes, you name it. But with that massive scale came some really intense scrutiny. Reports started highlighting grueling warehouse conditions, regulators were sounding alarms over monopolistic dominance, and it all culminated in a 2020 congressional hearing where Bezos actually had to sit and defend the machine he built. Yet almost anticlimactically, the architect decided his work was done. In February 2021, having successfully built this inescapable global infrastructure, Bezos quietly hands the reins over to Andy Jassy, the guy who built AWS, and just walks away from the day-to-day operations. There was no huge crisis, no big scandal. He just stepped back, kind of like an engineer who had finally finished perfectly tuning his engine.
But he definitely didn't retire to sip margaritas on a beach. Instead, he pivoted all of his intense focus and his immense capital straight back to his childhood obsession: space colonization, through his rocket company, Blue Origin. And he's not just doing quick space tourism stunts for billionaires either. He's genuinely focused on building reusable launch systems, lunar landers, and these massive orbital habitats.
His true endgame is actually revealed in this simple, wild statement: "We move all heavy industry off-planet to keep Earth pristine." Think about that. Earth, in his view, is just supposed to be this beautiful national park you visit on vacation. It really shows that dominating Earth was never the final goal for that high school kid who was dreaming about space hotels. Which leaves us with this final, crazy thought to consider. What if the greatest retail and logistics empire in human history was never actually the end goal? What if building the $2 trillion infrastructure of modern capitalism was simply step one? Just a meticulously planned, incredibly lucrative launchpad designed to fund humanity's next chapter among the stars. It definitely changes how you look at every Amazon package that arrives at your front door, doesn't it? Thanks for learning with me today, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.